something troubling has just unfolded in Australia. A journalist outside a mosque in Sydney was warned by worshippers to leave quickly. The reason? Inside the mosque, people were mourning and praising Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. Now, just pause for a moment and think about that. He's not a neutral figure in history. He's not a distant religious scholar, but he is the leader of a regime widely accused of terrorism, repression, and violence across the world. Yet here in Australia, a peaceful democratic nation, memorial services were held in several mosques to honour him. And when journalists arrived to ask questions, they were warned, not told, they were warned to leave. So today, we need to ask the uncomfortable questions, because the government doesn't seem to want to ask those questions. What does it mean when extremist figures are openly glorified here on our Australian national soil? And why are so many people in power reluctant to confront the implications of that? Are they too scared? Are their heads in the sand? I'm going to go into this a bit more after this. Stay tuned. Now, to understand why this controversy matters, you have to understand who Ayatollah Khamenei actually was. Khamenei served as supreme leader of Iran for decades, ruling one of the most authoritarian regimes in the modern world. Under his leadership, Iran's government oversaw brutal crackdowns on protesters, mass arrests and executions, even of his own countrymen, religious policing and repression, and by religious we actually mean Islamic, and global support for militant proxy units. That's little militant units of Islamic hatred that have been placed around the world. Now, the Iranian regime built an international network of influence and of these militant organisations. There's no word of a lie in that. And many analysts say Iran effectively exported ideology and armed proxies across the Middle East, fueling conflict and terrorism for decades. But the issue isn't just distant geopolitical conflicts, because the impact of that regime over there has reached all the way here to our shores here in Australia. Our own intelligence agencies have already warned that Iran's government has been involved in operations on Australian soil. According to security investigations, individuals linked to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC, were connected to attacks against Jewish targets here in Australia. And those incidents included an arson attack on a kosher restaurant in Sydney, a firebombing of the Adass Israel synagogue in Melbourne, which caused major damage and injured a congregant. And Australian authorities later said credible intelligence linked to Iran to those attacks, leading to extraordinary diplomatic action, which I am surprised that the government took, because they're so wetback. The government expelled Iran's ambassador and shut down Australia's embassy in Tehran. That alone tells you how serious this threat was. It's important to understand something else here as well. The IRGC, the powerful military force tied directly to Iran's leadership, is now designated as a terrorist organisation here on our shores. That means praising or glorifying it can potentially raise serious legal questions, which brings us back to those memorial services. After Khamenei's reported death in recent military strikes by the IDF and the US in the Middle East, several mosques in Australia announced memorial gatherings in Khamenei's honour. In Sydney and Melbourne, clerics and worshippers gathered to mourn the Iranian terrorist leader. For some attendees, these events that they had were described as spiritual mourning. But critics say that explanation just simply doesn't hold up. It doesn't hold water. Why? Because Khamenei was not merely a religious figure. He was the head of a regime accused of sponsoring terrorism worldwide. That's why the events triggered outrage from many Australians, including members of the Iranian Australian community themselves, many of whom have suffered under that regime, many of who escaped that regime. For them, seeing Khamenei praised in Australia was deeply disturbing. In fact, it was more disturbing to them than it was to our Prime Minister, our Foreign Minister, and our Home Affairs Minister. And that's disgusting. Now, at these memorial gatherings at these mosques, things escalated when reports attempted to cover one of the gatherings in particular. According to reports, a journalist outside a Sydney mosque was warned by worshippers there that he should leave quickly. Think about that for a moment. He was standing on the nature strip in a public place, filming, doing a news story, and he was warned by the people in the mosque that he should leave quickly. Now, a reporter in Australia, this is a country built on freedom of speech, and he was told to leave because he was documenting this public event. So why the hostility? Why the secrecy? And those questions have fueled a national debate, and this Australian here, me, I say rightly so. Now, some security experts say the issue cannot simply be ignored. It can't. A former Australian federal police detective suggested that people attending such events should at least be reviewed by security agencies. Not because mourning itself is illegal, but because praising figures tied to terrorist organisations would raise legitimate national security concerns. And I say they should be more than reviewed. They should be investigated. Those 5 mosques need to be put on the watch list. Under Australian law, glorifying terrorist organisations in ways that encourage violence can potentially be a criminal offence. And some of these mosques have already been in the news from their incitement on October 7th out in the streets with their rhetoric and their hate towards Jews, towards Australians, towards Christians. And this is where the politics of it enters this story. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, although he's a coward, he did publicly criticise the memorials, calling them inappropriate. They were more than inappropriate, Mr. Prime Minister. They shouldn't have happened. But the critics argue that his response stopped short of addressing the deeper issue because of his cowardness. There were calls for stronger action, investigation of organisers, monitoring of the attendees, examination of extremist networks, monitoring like the millions of people on the right side of politics did or were monitored and photographed and put on lists when they went out and protested for freedom during COVID. Why isn't that same thing happening here? And the government largely emphasised social cohesion and religious freedom rather than launching sweeping inquiries. I don't know why they keep pushing this social cohesion. These people in these mosques clearly aren't interested in social cohesion with our nation. They don't want to follow our rules. They want Sharia law. They don't want to follow our moral principles. And no other religion in this nation harbours even breeds terrorist ideology. No Christian organisation, no Hindu, no Sikhs, no Buddhists, only Islam. And why is that allowed to be so? Some commentators say that approach risks avoiding difficult questions about radicalisation. But that's probably true because this Prime Minister lives by avoidance. Others argue investigations must be careful and evidence-based. Either way, the debate reveals a difficult reality here. Modern security threats often develop quietly within societies, not just across distant battlefields, distant nations. They develop here in our nations. Like I said, Khamenei and the Iranian regime were funding and organising militant groups, proxies around the world. And proxies also means sleepers, and we have them here. Trust me when I say the timing of this controversy isn't accidental. Across the world, tensions involving Iran and its allies are escalating. We see it in the news every day. just this week, authorities in Britain arrested suspects accused of spying on Jewish communities on behalf of Iran. The mainstream media seem to have kept that sort of in that there's nothing to see here genre. And I believe that we've got the same sort of groups here, so in our nation. And meanwhile, geopolitical conflict in the Middle East, it continues to intensify following military strikes and the retaliatory actions. These developments highlight something security experts have warned about for years. Modern conflicts often spill beyond the borders. They reach diaspora communities. They reach social media. Sometimes they reach Western democracies themselves. That's what happens when we get sleepers in Western nations. Now, this does lead to a difficult but very, very necessary question. If individuals and fairly large numbers of individuals, which is concerning, as we see on the streets in these pro-Palestinian marches and in these 5 mosques, idolising and worshipping this Khamenei, in Australia openly celebrating things and leaders linked to terrorism. Now, what does that mean for our national security? It doesn't automatically mean that every attendee is dangerous. And I want to make that clear. But it is the ideology, not the person, that is dangerous. And every person who lives an ideology will follow that ideology to the end. In the case of Islam, they have to. Why is it that Australian citizens can see the danger, but the politicians that are in power are too stupid to see the red writing on the wall, the elephant that's in our communities? Australia has faced such threats before, from Islamist networks to far left extremists. The lesson from those experiences is simple. Ignoring warning signs rarely makes them disappear. Australia is a free country. Well, as free as we can be under a Labor government anyway. People have the right to worship, to gather, to express their beliefs. Unless it's on other things like abortions and things like that, then you can get thrown in jail. But freedom also requires vigilance. When figures tied to violent regimes are openly glorified on Australian soil, it raises questions that cannot simply be brushed aside by the politicians and by the media. All around the world, security threats are evolving. As I said, we're seeing that. They no longer arrive only from distant enemies across the oceans. Sometimes they develop quietly within societies themselves. And that means every Australian must stay aware, must be informed and alert, because the challenges facing the nation may not always come from outside. They may be growing and festering from within our own communities. If you enjoyed this, please like, share and subscribe to this channel, Voice in the Wilderness Australia. I'm Brian. Until I see you next time with another hard-hitting impact story. Bless you.